Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the session that every content creator actually needs to be a part of. That's because this session actually tells you guys some of the things that you should understand as a content creator. And we'll be having conversations with some people that are very knowledgeable in some of the things that you should know, which is primarily intellectual property, and as a content creator, things that you should understand. It's a very big deal. We've seen in recent years how people lose rights and access to things that they create. So we're going to be having some brilliant minds in the creative and legal space joining us for this conversation. My name is Lola OJ Ojetola. I'm the creative director of Popcorn, a media-themed agency that focuses on the movie industry. Please follow us on Instagram, so that's on the school Popcorn. Put out some really great content. So that's at Popcorn. Yes. Okay, so with me on this session, I'll be having the following people who join me. Somtochi Oruche, Mojisola Sapara. I apologize for wondering your name. Mojisola. Yes, please join me here. Please join me. Somtochi, please join me. Tosin, please join me. Lola and Amanda. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Amanda. Please put your hands together.
My name is Tosin Igho. I'm a content producer and also a film director as well. I've done a lot of shows for DSTV and FilmFlix.
You have a new one coming up very soon.
A lot of things we'll go into it.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Somtochi Oruche. I'm a legal practitioner, a legal educator. You can follow me on as Obasabi Lawyer on Facebook.
Thank you very much.
My name is Mojisola Sapara. I work with FilmOne Entertainment. I'm the head of the Ancillary and rights contracting rights. So basically what that means is that we distribute film content locally and globally.
My name is Lola OJ, and I'm a content creator and also specializing in intellectual property.
So thank you very much once again, everybody, for joining us. So let's get started with the conversation. So the concept of intellectual property, it sounds like big grammar, and that is something that is very, very important for people who are in the space of creating whatever it is that applies to this concept. So what exactly does it mean, and are there different types of forms? I'll start with you.
So, intellectual property, I think the easiest way to explain it is the property of your creativity. Like what you own, works you create. So it's not just ideas, because ideas cannot be created, but when you put those ideas to use and create something, a product or service, then that becomes your intellectual property. So unlike other properties that you can touch, you can't really touch this, but you created this type of imagination. And there are different forms of intellectual property rights in Nigeria. We have copyright, we have trademark, we have industrial right, industrial designs, and we have patents. Now, within the entertainment and creative industry, there is very complex copyright and trademark. Copyright deals with works with movies, write-off, your music, and everything, creativity, anything that you create for copyright. Right? Trademark has to do just branding. Protect yourself, what's the public, when you sell yourself to the public, brand name, that catchphrase, example, for the shine, so that popcorn companies that has a trademark, that's the name, package your business as, and everybody can relate to it. That's all it's really.
Thank you very much for that. So to put it in context further, as a creative, to you, what would you regard as your intellectual property?
I mean, there's basically like you said, there's a number of things like a concept, a logo, a character, a number of things. I mean, it is a huge form of things that you can get into trouble. I mean, we'll go for it. You can get into trouble, by using intellectual property. I mean, 2 seconds of the song. I even heard once where somebody like if somebody mimes the lyrics of "We Will Rock You" on the film set, you have to pay something there. I think so. Intellectual property is something that is overlooked mainly because in our own industry, a lot of things are done in limits, majorly, usually like the film industry. A lot of things that cannot fly internationally and should be. So a lot of people lose a lot of time and they don't know about this information that they don't have that allows a lot to get passed. And maybe they're going to get that. I know that definitely the fact is a lot gets on the way and gets like allowed. A lot shouldn't. A lot of people are not making the money they should make from what the industry was.
Okay. So for content, for comic writers in Rome, I think what I could interpret this also so that there's a bit of understanding for that is the characters you create when you're creating your comics, the story you create and things like that. So those are some of the things you need to put into consideration.
Logos as well.
Logos for your company and things like that.
That's a trademark logo as well. So the name and the logo itself will be two different.
Oh, thank you very much. So, in terms of intellectual property, Amanda said there are different forms and things like that. So, if we're looking at the entertainment space, are there things that generally differ from the entertainment space when looking at intellectual property and other spaces? Are there things that are unique to the entertainment space? For example, academic space, for example.
Basically, intellectual property in the academic space is so, but because digital rights are relatively new, Nigeria does not really have so much capacity to take digital rights. What we actually have most times is copyright for books, like physical copies of books, instead of the content you create online. You understand? So I feel like intellectual property. I need to add something at this point. Like it's very, very important. Copyright does not need to, among the points of intellectual property, copyright does not need to be registered, right? Once you create a content, you are already entitled to copyright. You do not need to go and register it. So just you already are entitled to it. But we advise you to register with the Nigerian Copyright Commission, like the NCC, to enable you for them to have a register of it, which makes it very easy for you to prove that yes, you're the original owner of this book. Because if you say you're the original owner of this book, how do we prove it? Right? So that's what I'm but it's basically different.
So when you say that digital rights is something new in Nigeria, could you expand on that?
Digital rights, look, the laws we have, when you look at copyrights and the trademarks act, right, which you mentioned, the laws that we have basically provide for like the ones we are used to. Yes, kind of right. So we have some treaties that we have signed which are international, like that which we as Nigerians were members to. Just like the WIP treaty. So that one actually covers for copyright for digital rights. Yeah, so it's actually enforceable.
So if I create an issue, am I funny waters?
No, you're not. The treaty actually
Covers it, actually protects. Okay. Because I know that some of the previous conversations that we had, there are people that all they do is writing. So I just wanted to be sure.
The treaty, WIP, you can check it out. It's a WIP copyright treaty.
Okay.
All right. So, the name entitlement and academic space is not more different. When it comes to enforcement, the name entitlement industry, there's slight difference. So, for example,
restriction and provided the copyright right to supposed to be right. But then we in the industry realize that because of that relaxed over time, it's now something that you have to beg for. So although it's necessary, although it's provided in the constitution that or rather the laws are supposed to give credit, but then you have to remind the other people you're working with in the industry they have to give credit. So it's not as if there's anything different, but when it comes to enforcing it, there's some industry practice that kind of professionalized intellectual property in the industry. But the protection, the processes for registration and all of that is exactly as it is in that kind of
So a lot of people feel, oh, the process of getting a lawyer on board and all that is tedious, and the whole process of protecting yourself and things like that is actually a tedious process, and people try to avoid such. Do you want to say something about that in terms of if I want to, for example, I'm writing a book or something, and I want to go through the process of actually protecting things that I'm thinking, is it a tedious process?
I think for me, like any other process of maybe applying for a visa or doing a proper documentation like entering university or doing anything, there are processes that needs to be done. There are things that must, there are stages that has to be followed for you to actually get that result that you want. I know that Nigeria, things they cannot make things a little bit more strenuous than other countries. But I think that should not be the focus. The focus should not be on how strenuous it is or the process that it entails. Like she said, that it really doesn't. You just have to go and register for the copyright. For trademark, it might be maybe 1 or 2 step process. But on the long run, you need to think about how you can fully maximize your innovation, your creativity, your IP. It's very important that you look at the long term in terms of the fact that whatever you create now, it has the capacity to be the next great comic book, the next great animation. Because there is a lot of eyes right now on the African continent. People are looking to Africa for stories, for ideas, for the next big thing. We all hear that Africa is the next, denotes, and everything. But so you need to ensure that you are putting all your fundamental legal things in place. It is very, very important because on the long term, somebody is going to go and demand for your product, and it depends on how well you are able to structure it for them to put a price to it. Somebody said something about a bottle of Emma water. Depending on the placement that it is, it determines the price. Like in a hotel, it's sold at 500 naira. Somewhere else, it's sold at 1,000 naira. Because the structures are different, the ambience are different. So depending on how well you have structured your creativity, your IP, it depends on how much you demand for it. So it's important that all those elements of your trademark, everything, your copyright, your patent is in place from now, and the earlier the better. I can assure you again, the big markets are coming into Africa in the next 1-2 years. It's our time. It's our time to actually own our own content. So please let's look at the process. Let's look at eating the fruit of our labor on the long term. Yes.
Okay. So to build on that.
Everything you said, I 100% agree. And then I want to say as well that when we're saying it can be a tedious process, it's far more tedious when things go wrong. So even though it seems like a long process, it's a longer process when you feel your rights have been infringed upon and you don't have to start again. You could have already been halfway through that if you understand what I mean. Yeah. So like you already stated, that look at it in terms of the long term. I think I have something that may be valuable, even if not to everyone, it's definitely valuable to you because it's your creativity. So think about how you can protect it now so that if ever your rights are infringed upon, it's not going to be now you have to go back to protecting it, then bringing it, just take that step because it's a lot more tedious when things go wrong. So I would say probably look at it that way.
So recently we have been complaining that there are deaths of cases, right? But there's a recent case last year that the court actually awarded 703 million naira to 703 million naira to the plaintiff, right? Because his copyright was infringed on. Do you understand? So I feel like that was really interesting. No, of course, they're definitely going to pay. They will definitely pay the money. It's not police, it's not Nigerian police. They'll definitely pay the money. Do you understand? So, no, they might go on appeal, so we don't know what their outcome is, right? But I'm just saying that the reason why they were able to award that to the plaintiff was because they actually registered their copyright. They went to the NCC. You know, I told you don't need to do that, but you should do that, right? Yes, they went to the NCC to register it, and that was why you were able to prove that, yes, this is the original copy of our work, and these people copied it and did exactly the same thing. It was a program or something, exactly the same thing that we were planning to do.
Yeah, I'd like to really the idea that it's a lot easier to do in the beginning. It's like I give you a story. In my early days, one of the first productions I did, from like a contract with DSTV, it was on air, was somebody else called him and said, "Look, I have a show with the same name," and you know, I mean, I had already signed, assured my own contractor that everything is fine. But I was lucky. I think you guys can confirm this as well. I was lucky just because the title was Once Upon a Time, and there are a number of things like I think like Shampoo and rest that are in the open market. So it was a case where I was just lucky. If that was not the case, I would have struggled over my head because I had not gone to trademark the name of my show and stuff like that. And somebody else had the exact same show on another local channel. So that person thought it was infringement. I was going to sue. But luckily, when we went to NCC, you can't own Once Upon a Time. They are not, right? You can't own some things like, yeah, something. So I was just lucky. So it's actually a good idea to get because, like I said, after that, I've never ever.
I think there was something with Chino Achille and 50 Cent. There was a case then, once upon a things fall apart. So I think those are some instances where we can look at it. Lola, this question is for you. Can IPs be globalized or are they restricted to?
Okay, I'll take like half of this question and I'm sure you guys will chip in because it's a bit, I don't know, it's a bit.
I'm guessing this conversation is kind of because I'm seeing the way you guys are responding like, where do I start from?
Yeah, it's like I also don't want to go to like, oh my God, let's just say things that will be important to you.
Yeah.
So, in essence, right, intellectual property rights, they're territory in nature, meaning where you register it, the territory you register it is where your intellectual property will be protected. So if I register in Nigeria, it will be protected in Nigeria, generically. However, there are instances where it can be, it can be extended or the registration does go beyond the shores of Nigeria. So we're talking about copyright, because that is automatic, right? You don't necessarily have to, it's advised to register the copyright, but even if you don't, if somebody else in another country infringes on your copyright, just because it was in the territory of Nigeria doesn't mean they will get to make that infringement because it's copyright, right? So it's that particular type of intellectual property. It can, if I write a book today in Nigeria, Blood and Water, for example, and then someone in America writes a book exactly the same Blood and Water, they can't say, oh, I'm in America, you're in Nigeria, and it's the same thing. They're not infringing on my rights. They are. However, when you're talking about things like trademarks, right, patents, industrial designs, that's when, if your country is not a member of a certain treaty or they're not part of a convention, then it would be territorial. It would stay on the shores of Nigeria. But Nigeria, for example, for patents, Nigeria is part of the PTC, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Which means you can register that the patent and it would actually, in other countries, it will also still be protected. But when it comes to like industrial designs and stuff, nationally, you should register it first nationally, and then go on to see if you can register in other territories. But the copyright is probably the one, if you're talking about writing comic books and things like that, the copyright is probably the one you're gonna be more familiar with. Probably you're gonna come across that more, and probably trademarks, I would say, in regards to comics, right? So copyright, definitely register it if you can, hopefully. But it is something that someone can still infringe on your rights even if they are abroad. Don't let people kind of intimidate you to thinking that, oh, I'm here, and it blatantly exploited your work. Like, you definitely authorship, you got your timestamp, you created it on this day, published it, someone has definitely copied it. Don't let them intimidate you, perhaps because they think they're abroad. You may still definitely have a very good case in terms of infringement. Please somebody add, because it's a lot in my head right now.
That's what she's saying. That's what she's saying. IP rights are territorial, but nothing stops you from going beyond shores of Nigeria to win this kind of rights. If I have a fashion brand, say tomorrow, and I'm not doing business in Paris and America, obviously I'll register my trademark over there, obviously I'll register my industrial design over there. But the fact that I've registered it in Nigeria, it doesn't mean there's some cases that have that protection over there. Now, copyright, like she mentioned, is automatic. So what happens is, if someone infringes on your copyright or steals your work in America, then all you have to do is register that work in America. So obviously you have to register for them to international. But then you can take the initial step of your lawyer writing to the president or the person who infringed the right, because it's automatic. So it's saying that when you create the work, it's also protected in other place that copyright protection is automatic.
Sorry, I would also like to add something. I think for me, the fact that we're talking here about intellectual property, the importance and how you can go about it, is actually very important. But I see that one of the major challenges is that a lot of us don't even have knowledge about this particular stand that we have on our intellectual property. So I would really employ everyone to actually get the right knowledge. Like, I think there are lawyers for each category, like each level of your income. You can actually get a lawyer to actually educate you, because education of your intellectual property is very important. Like, you can be sitting on $1 million and you're not even know. And you might think that the person in America has something more than you. Okay, but I'm not that talented, I'm not that gifted. But it's a lie. You have something that the world needs to see. So it's important that you actually gain that knowledge. It's important for you to know. So even after this basic more information about intellectual property in terms of copyright, which relates to most people here, you need to know how to specifically guard your IP. Very important.
So in terms of seeking this knowledge, I mean, I see like an obvious question, but I guess some references, sources that people should be looking at in terms of, okay, at least let me understand this person, right? Speak to a lawyer or something like that.
I think recently our film house digest, we actually done something recently that spoke about intellectual property in the film business. I don't know if I can share it out. It was actually a very detailed article, very, very detailed article. But however, I would say that this particular thing, let's not think that we can do everything, which is not. People, she said she's a lawyer, IP lawyer, specialist. She said she's he said something about on Instagram or something.
Not a legal educator.
Legal educator, so they have that expertise for a reason. So it's important that you gain the expertise, because you cannot go on Google and just get a lot of knowledge, but you have to sit down with a proper lawyer, and that's what they do. It's different when you don't go to the market to find out how you can shop for a doctor. So you go to the hospital, because they went through all that training for it. So it's important that you don't just get knowledge on Google or just read. You think that just read is just extra, because when you're talking to your lawyer, you know what to see. But you sit down with a proper lawyer. Okay, this is what I have. How can I protect my IP? What do I need to do? I want to do this, I want to do that. Can you guide me through the process? Can you tell me this is what I see for my brand, what I see myself becoming? Please, can you advise me and help me? It's important to go to the right source.
No, I think everything said is spot on. But I think I kind of wanted to just bring it down and when we're talking about copyright, just so to make sure that we're on the same page here, we're talking about if you're writing a novel, we're talking about if you're making a song. Anyone feel to add? We're talking about the original authorship of something that's come from your mind into somewhat of a tangible form, a form that people can digest. It's not just something that's sitting in your mind and, oh my gosh, I had that idea. That's not infringing on anything. Do you understand? It has to be in a tangible form that people can see that it has been somewhat documented,
I also have one I had an idea and I wanted to hire someone to work on it with me. And I sent an email, this is what I'm looking at, I had a meeting. And then I got engaged in something else. So maybe 4 months down the line, that person calls and says, hey, I pitched this idea that we both came up with. And so people are interested in that. And since you're busy, I'm going to go ahead.
Very common setup.
That's
the importance of having
what saved me in the first place was I had sent an email with an NDA attached. So
what's an NDA?
What's
doing legal job?
So I had an email that was dated. Do you understand? That was dated to a time when we met in July, but I sent you this email in April. So this email had the concept. So you can't tell me that we both came up with something that I sent you. So it's something I'm always trying to do now. Even before I go to SEC or whatever cases, if I write a script or email it to myself, email it to someone. So there's some form of, okay, I wrote this thing and I sent it somewhere. So if somebody says on Friday, you can present, this was created at this date. So like she was saying, even if you don't get to SEC at first, the first step you can take is putting whatever you've done in a tangible form and find a way to stamp to date stamp, maybe send an email, mail it to yourself, to the post office or something like that. So you know, okay, this was created on Friday, then you will get to the SEC and you will copyright it later. But you can take your comic book and scan it, email it to yourself, something, some form of sense. So you don't just say, I came up with this. There's some form of legit.
Maybe I can just add something. So I think it's very important because I know that there are stages that people want to get to. For I want to talk to a lawyer when I'm at this whatever stage. So I mean, it's very important that from what everybody here has said, you start thinking about it from the start. People like Ugali, that has the Disney story, Comic Republic, and all those guys, they don't get those deals without these things they're talking about. Right. Even those organizations are not going to discuss with them if those things are not in place. NDA, whatever it is, all those things, non-disclosure agreements and whatnot. So I think it's very important for you to put that into consideration. I'll let you know.
I just also want to add, right? Because sometimes when we talk about intellectual property, it sounds like a very abstract thing. Like it sounds like something that's like, I don't know, it sounds like software and tech or something. And trust me, I'm not techie at all, right? So when you think about intellectual property, you have to understand as well that it's an asset and it can be a huge asset to your business. So if you own trademarks, if you register, anything you own, the same way property, this is yours, it gives you value. You own a house, it's an asset. That's how you have to see your intellectual property. Don't trivialize it because it's really something that in the future, like you said, you could be sitting on $1 million, $1 million deal based on the fact that if someone wants to even value what you have, if you own the trademark to it, the value is going to be higher. What they'll offer you is higher because they know that since you own this thing, you can exploit it in ways that perhaps if you didn't own it, you couldn't. When you own something, you have exclusive rights, to exploit and make money from that thing. If you don't own it, sometimes people can be a bit, they're not going to 100% buy into something if they're not sure you really have possession of that thing. So really see it in that way that it's not anything abstract. It's something that on paper, it can really increase, it can increase your earnings. There's no other way to put it. Like you can financially, you can do a lot better if you actually own your creativity, so to speak, in a proper registered form. Like not just just like saying, you know what I mean? It's like having your certificate. Yeah, having a certificate.
Okay.
And I'll going to use the example of Afrobeat song, Chimamanda's book. The fact that she, of course, Chimamanda, like you can't expect anything less, but just imagine just a normal person that wrote a book, or even Harry Potter that we all watch and we all love. Owning a book, and you're able to have a proper documentation of your copyright, your IP for that particular product of yours, and Warner Brothers, Disney, they come to Africa and they're like, okay, just like they did for Afrobeat's song. She was able to maximize on the returns, maximize on revenue concerning that book because everything was in place. So if it was just a book on the shelf, maybe in an African library in America that somebody just saw, and it's your book, but there was no proper documentation, I'm sure the lawyers there can say, and they adapt it into a film, and Disney is come and they adapt it into a film, you've actually lost so much money. And I'm sure that there are people like that. Sorry?
No,
But I see the point.
This is going to
So,
be
so yes, if it ends, there will be no returns. There might be a longer process, but you spend much more money.
Yes,
on getting exactly right.
they have money.
Because they have money, they can actually just keep you off the table. And what if it's registered? If everything is as in cast in stone, like you have proper documentation there, your structure, it will be easier to actually gain your rights on it, your monetary value of that your IP. So
and also to add to that, just like I said earlier, it's like property. You can actually, your family can inherit it. So you can register your copyright and register your estate. Yes, like an estate, and you value it, and God forbid if you die tomorrow, your family inherit it. Because truthfully, like copyright lasts a long period of time after your death.
Like how long?
So it depends. For music after 70. For movies don't wait for the person to die. It starts counting immediately. So it's like from the day of production. But for music, for books, comic books, drawing, paintings, is when the author dies, it starts counting.
The way in which to approach such things is easier when you know what you're dealing with. Sometimes the cease and desist is what you need. Sometimes it's not enough. But if you have a lawyer from the beginning that's following you through the process, that know exactly what's happening, that knows about who's infringing, it's a lot easier to understand how best to remedy this infringement. That all of a sudden just getting a phone call from someone that they're angry, that sue the person. Sometimes that's not really the way to go in Nigeria. Suing can take some time and cost a lot of money. So it might not necessarily be, that suing is not always the thing that you need. If there's a remedy that can do quickly what actually is wrong, which is probably someone stopping them from making money off of your work. So if you have a lawyer from the beginning, it's just easier. So there's a synergy. They know exactly what's happening, and then it's just easier to. Infringements come. Like, that's life. I want everyone to not be scared of this thing, because what happens is people get scared of lawsuits, infringement, they're stealing my work. This is life. The biggest companies in the world have lawsuits that they know every week. Yes. Every week. Many. And they're still there, so they're still doing well. And they're not being like suppressed or oppressed by the lawsuits. It just comes with life. Human beings, most of the biggest people you see, they have lawsuits all the time. Exactly. I've had lessons like this.
If I say later now, I'm like,
Yes. And again, to add to what you said, most Nigerians like money. So it's cheaper. It's cheaper for you to have a lawyer from the onset. And because then, apart from someone infringing on your right, you could as well infringe on someone's right. So two-way traffic. So it could be you unknowingly using a third-party work that is not clear, and the person will decide to sue you or make threats of suing. So it's always necessary. Like she mentioned, their lawyers at different levels of income can get. Was not being the lawyer of retainer or but having a lawyer, you like one now, someone you can talk to. It's very important. As a creator, it's very, very important.
like once you're starting a project, I think it's good to just continue.
So the next question is, if I decide, if somebody is interested in something that is my intellectual property and wants to buy it or something, I said you can still have some access or rights to it in terms of my patents or something. Is it possible?
I think the question was to sell something and to still own it is kind of a contradiction. So if you're selling and assigning the rights of something over to someone else, to me, you've done this with it. Now, if you're like licensing something to someone, you're saying for this limited period of time, you can exclusively or non-exclusively or in a restricted way use this thing. You are still the owner.
So sort of like Sony and
yeah, like even most of all these Disney
Just like a film, like you're licensing to the Netflix or you're licensing to the African Magic. So the common agreement is that you license your movie to a streaming platform for 24 months. That's the standard. However, it can be lesser, it can be more, depending on the licensing fee that you have to offer. So I think, as she said, your product to a particular buyer, it depends, and that is also why you need a lawyer, because for every deal that you do, there will be a contract that will be signed, that will be sent to you to read. Now, what most Nigerians fail to do in the past, but like you said, that everybody that you see today, every people in the creative industry, they have lawyers now because they now know that, wow, I need to be reading this document, not just my two eyes, but and the expert eyes also reading it, because there are some language that these lawyers like to put in those contracts that you would think that it means something, but it totally means something else. Just so that, I honestly don't know why they talk like that. In contract, really.
They are trained.
I don't really like exactly. But you need a proper lawyer to guide you, to let you know that you still have that ownership. You still own your product. So you just be licensing it to people for a particular period of time. Get your acquisition fee, then you move on to the next one. Like for us, in terms of distribution, we tend to ensure that we maximize the lifespan of your film, animation, film content, anything, series, documentary. We then ensure that we maximize it to the fullest. So there are different windows that we go into. So from the cinema, we go to the streaming platform, we go to airlines, we go to them for data. There are other separate platforms as well. So, but at the end of the day, you still have ownership of your film. You still have ownership of your animation project. It is still yours. But at each window, you give either exclusivity, just as you said, exclusive rights or non-exclusive rights. So you actually still own it, but you are giving the rights to another platform for a particular period of time.
So one thing I'll just add is every contract, everything you have depends on the contract between two of you. So you can decide to just license, or you can decide to just give out everything. It depends. Like Amanda, she didn't give out the entire rights. She just allowed them to make it into something else. So you just talk to a lawyer and make sure that before you sign any contract, do not. That's like you can sign it when you like. Just one signature, and you think you're ready to run this. Yeah, you really think you won't understand what they're saying. Trust me, you won't understand what they're doing.
But then it might seem look straightforward, but there are certain
that's some words that are very
That's just how and also to add everything they've said, you meet someone that say that they want to sell their rights, but they want certain holdbacks. So most times it doesn't make sense. You have to actually, like they've all mentioned, speak to a lawyer. If you're not sure you want to sell everything totally, but there are different rights within law. For example, comic like the production rights, or the adaptation rights, could be anything. So if you decide that you want to license certain rights and hold back on certain rights, and decide you want to sell certain rights and hold back on certain rights. But everything you have to be careful, especially if you're talking about selling. But the moment you're talking about selling, like they mentioned, and you're signing an agreement, you might say you want to sell just part of it, but then the agreement is covering everything. Because you're not giving it to a lawyer, you just read through. And most times it's natural. You just look at, this is the amount of money they are paying, this is what it is, and we sign. You start looking at certain intricate terms to it. So just have a lawyer.
You guys, especially in terms of people who are doing communications, have to be careful. Because I mean, if you look at like things like the cases are critical. Like the idea that Spider-Man is owned by Sony, or Marvel is owned by Disney. So they sit down in a room and say, okay, we are going to pay for this, we are going to pay for that, we're going to release the film in this place, we have to own this amount. So it becomes a conundrum. And things like, I know, like when you're making the first Spawn movie, in the comic books, the original villain they wanted to use was created by his friend. But that guy gave him the rights to make a comic movie. So when he wanted to make the film, that guy said no. So they couldn't use that character in the film, but he could use the character in the book. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, like I said, so with comic books, and they have things like Star Wars, where maybe Luke Skywalker is owned by here, but the world itself is not owned by. So people, this comic book can write stories about Luke Skywalker alone, without, so things get, depending on the comic book around, like you said, things getting very, serious. So you guys have to kind of have proper IPs, who owns what.
Not just having a lawyer, you have to specialize
specialized knowledge.
Specialized knowledge. Because like example, you make the comic book and he comes up with one character. And you guys, originally, you use your comic book for a character made by him. But does he know that he knows IP to who has created it? Do you understand? You release the comic tomorrow and like, you know, from on top of it. You're generation future.
Yeah, and I would like to also say that to determine the price of your comic book or your animation work, it's important to know your industry, like what the asking price is in your industry. So that you don't shoot yourself, on your own feet. So it's important that if you're selling a comic book, I can't remember, I think you do for your new comic book, you do the story, you do the sketching, you do everything. So maybe you need to find out, okay, for the story, it's also a price. For sketching, it's also a price, because in a more civilized world, everybody does different things. So if you are not going to do everything together, you need to put a price tag for it, and you don't allow anybody to come and tell you that, oh, for everything just take this, for everything just take this. You need to know
what your value is worth.
Yes, what your value is, not just what your value is worth, but what is in your industry, what the value is in the industry. So what is being like, we all know that maybe the packet of news is like 15 naira or something. So but you cannot go and sell it for 100 naira because nobody will buy it. So for your own industry, you need to now find out that, okay, what exactly is the cost, the price tag on my how is the price tag on my work? So I'm creating an animation now. So for a 30 minutes animation, one episode, what is the value of it in the market? How can I edge against it? What should I put my price at? So you need to be able to determine your pricing very early as well.
Okay.
Sorry, can I add? Sorry to add.
Yes.
Two things I want to add. Also, when we're talking about intellectual property, there's also, if you're paying someone to do something for you, I would feel like there should be some kind of agreement or something like that, right? Because normally, when you create something, the owner is the person that's created that thing, right? If maybe you didn't pay me, so it's not a straight work for hire. Maybe it's like you tell your friend, please help me sketch this thing. I want to put it inside. They sketch it. I take it, I put it in my book, and I make money. She's gonna come knocking at my door saying I owe her money. I'm like, well, you agreed to sketch this thing for me for free. But the truth is, you're using her intellectual property. If she perhaps would have signed and said, I'm happy to do this work for free, and I signed, like, I don't have any rights on this thing, she can't knock on my door later. And that thing happens a lot in Nigeria. We call upon, when you don't have much money now, you call upon people to help you to do things for you. Then when they but what you don't realize is if they're creating that thing, they own it. They own it. Especially if you're not paid for something, you can't even say, oh no, it's contractual, oh, they weren't employed by you, it wasn't under employment. It's not owned by you, it's owned by that person. That's when you start seeing all this, you can't release this because this was in this, and it can get very technical. Hence why I talk to people that actually understand. But don't trivialize this thing, because it can get very technical. I mean, down to like the T, like very technical. The second thing I want to say is when we speak about licensing, we're speaking a lot about books being adapted into films and stuff, but also don't limit it. When you see Disney somewhere, like let's say H&M or any other clothing brand, put a Disney Mickey Mouse, they have to obtain that license to put on that t-shirt. Disney got money from it, and of course H&M or whoever are getting money from that thing. You can't just take someone's work and put it on you. So even with comic books, characters, it can be adapted to phone covers. Like you can make money not just from book to film. You can make money from like partnerships with clothing for a theme park, like Spider-Man World or Peppa Pig World. This is all intellectual property, and it started from a cartoon. Do you understand what I mean?
Boys is doing right now with this merchandise.
Merchandise and stuff like that. Exactly. Yeah.
And also to add to what she said, we have this notion in Nigeria that once we pay someone for something, that means we owe it. Payment in our laws, payment doesn't mean transfer of rights. So it's a different thing. Not doesn't. So it's a different thing if you hire the person, like the person is under your employment, and you're paying the person's salary. Paying the person's salary every month. If that's the case, then automatically whatever the person is doing belongs to the person as the employer. if I engage you now, you're not it's not a continuous business. I don't pay you salary, and I say, okay, draw this for me. And after drawing it, I pay. It doesn't mean that you've transferred your rights to me. Your rights are still with you. You walked out of this room with your rights. So tomorrow, even after I've paid, if I want to release it and you're no longer interested and you don't like me anymore, you can decide to, you know what, send a cease and desist or take me to court and you judge me and say you cannot use that drawing in my book. Do you get? Because I still don't right. So you have to have proper documentation. That's the essence of having that. So it might not be anything huge. It could just be a certificate of authorship. It could just be a one-page paper that says you're transferring your rights to me, and that what?
Can be an email.
It can be an email, but in that email, it has to be clear that you replying I agree or not replying to the email means you've accepted the rights. If not, it has to be something signed. So it shows that you acknowledge the fact that you accept what this person wants to do. Do you understand? There have to be offer and acceptance.
Yes, exactly.
So you have to sign it and say, okay, I transfer my rights to you in total. Because like I said, there are different tiny rights within it. I transfer my rights to you fully. I've taken this payment. I don't have any business with this. Maybe higher is going further. I want you to give me credit. Or if you want to use, you cannot have like little things you want to add. If you want to use it in merchandise, I have to know how the drawing looks. I have to be sure that drawing is not reproduced. You can that like that have a counter. Yeah, that would be like little restrictions. So you can decide to hold on to try to make money for the future. Maybe you can have that's the essence of having talking to an entertainment lawyer or talking to an IP lawyer. Because person can make you see the bigger picture. Okay, tomorrow if you want to create this to a big character that will be in a team pack, I want to get 2% of whatever, that would be your own control. But you as the person employing the service of another person, it's necessary for you to have a document showing that you're transferring your rights fully. Just like I own all the rights. Again, if you want to, you can back me up here. If you want to take your work to Netflix and some of these guys distribute, you have to show the chain of title. You have to show that everything you own, everything that come together to create this work you have, you own the rights. So every tiny bit of person that contributed creatively, a creative way to this work has transferred their rights to you. And you own it, you own everything before you can actually like distribute it on certain platforms. So payment doesn't mean, even with photography, that happens a lot. So people take pictures and they feel, oh, because I paid the photographer for the picture. Oh, it's no. The photographer owns the picture. So the only thing you have is to limit the photographer as to the subject of photograph. Maybe the person cannot use it in certain ways because of your image right. Aside that, they own the picture, they can do whatever they want to do with the picture. You pay for the picture doesn't mean you own shit. So payment doesn't mean transfer of rights. You have to be clear that
That's why I get to that because the sign and the pick up.
So what if I work for you?
Yeah.
And I'm a sketcher.
Yeah.
And I sketch a particular design. Do you own the rights?
If it's under employment, whether there is a contract of employment or not, but it can be established that pay you salary or I pay you commission continuously. That's an employment relationship between us. Whatever you create belongs to you. Now, when it comes to IP, there could be certain there could be little.
There's still little.
Yes, yes. So, for example, if I hire you, if I hire you, I don't know so much about comics, so sorry. If I hire you to do a particular job and you do something else, that other thing that you did cannot fall under automatic transfer of rights. Do you understand me? Both of us. So let me see in fashion now. That one I can relate to more. So if I hire you to sew and you turn out to start designing, it doesn't mean your design belongs to me because I hired you to just sew. Do you understand? So now when you do something outside your course of employment or the reason why I employed you, me and you will discuss because you created it under my business company, you created under being under me. So both of us will discuss whether you're going to own the rights fully, whether we own it partially, whether you're going to transfer the rights. But if I hired you to sketch and you sketch, at first there's an employment relationship between us. I pay you salary, I pay you commission continuously. Then whatever is sketching belongs to me, not you. I don't need to do any write-up or signing of agreements automatically. Whatever you create belongs to you.
Just to add, the counter offer, right? She said something about offer, and then the person wants to accept, and then it creates his own, like, you must do this, you must do that, right? Once you do that, it's no longer acceptance, it's not a counter offer. Do you understand? So if you just end it and maybe call the person and say, okay, I'm heard, we'll do it. There is no acceptance, there is no contract.
Or if you sign it,
there's a contract.
or then if you sign it and now call the person and start telling the person, but hey, I've signed this, so but tomorrow if you go and want it, it's what you signed that can be held against you, not any other communication.
As much as possible.
I have a question. This is just it's coming from my side. What you're saying sounds so advantageous.
Very
Just to confirm, if I had a scriptwriter and I was paying the scriptwriter a monthly fee and I'm paying for 1 year, and next year he writes an amazing script, it's mine.
Yes, I pass both of you as your work. That next
was now my
you employ the agreement.
No, I'm saying if I employ the scriptwriter for a year, 12 months,
And the contract is for
when
a
I'm
year.
working on to the 14th month and he writes his scripts,
That's what
in his bedroom.
And it's
No,
you have to know.
but it's still under my employment.
No.
Does it have to be in my
You don't
office?
own every creation from that person.
Nah, but I
You own
hire you to
everything
write
that happens
scripts.
in the creation during the process of his employment with you. So in the office, if you guys worked on 12 scripts that year in the office, as per this is what we're doing, and you guys are, then those 12 scripts you would own. If he goes home at night working on a secret script, that's his script.
No, I don't mean the secret script. I really mean
Okay.
if he's in the office, yeah, like I said, he's in the office now,
Okay.
and he has this amazing idea. He says, "Boss, I have this amazing idea for this script. It's mine."
You know, it's not what
Just
it's
get
not
it.
To draw on the agreement on the same side.
Yeah.
To be on the same side. Yeah, you decide. Financially, so we have production companies, media companies that hire in-house script writers, and they're there to write scripts, they're there to develop stories. So that one is automatic. Whatever you're developing in-house belongs to the media company. You don't need any extra.
Oh, you know, it's different. If you say, boss, I have a really good idea, like, can I run it by you? Kind of, that bit is a bit grey.
But that's what I'm
Because it's
thinking.
not necessarily what you've not
No,
said.
but either way,
Let's develop this thing.
either way,
Sometimes
just
I
like
to you, you get.
So I
Yeah.
have experience from working in advertising. Sorry, let me say something. And now, within the creative department, right, your job is to create stuff. So, for example, we are working on a slogan for a particular, and then you come up with something while it is, I believe it belongs to the company.
Yes.
Right. Now, I think the context now is okay. So I go up to my supervisor and I'm like, "Whoa! I came up with this exciting idea for fan yoga. I think it's really dope." I think that's what we're talking about.
No.
Right?
That's because advertising is different. The fan yoga is paying your company to come up with, so they're paying. This fan yoga is already owned by them. Okay, so they're just paying you to come up with ideas and along. I think that's a different.
So
what I'm saying.
let me just make this. So answer his question, right? I think the best way that it will cover everything is if you sign it in the employment contract.
exactly.
If it's written, if it's
That whatever
expressly
you
encouraged, yes, that anything
you create,
anything you
that's
create
the
is
safer side.
going to. But at the same time, if the court sees that you're being a little bit mean or you're being very greedy, kind of, right? The court might want to bring in law.
It sounds it's gangster.
It's like songwriters. Songwriters create amazing songs that the songs make more than they can ever imagine. You've already signed, you're here to write the song, you let go of all your rights, you've been paid a fee, that's it. You can write the biggest song in the world.
And sometimes after you've been paid and you've signed, you also signed in your contract that you cannot say you
That you can't say you wrote the song, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so like me, I think this session summarizes as something. There are so many things. I thought I knew stuff. I thought I was an intellectual, but trust me, after this session, I need a lawyer. So I think that's something that everybody here that is a creative that creates stuff should take away. And I think something else that we also mentioned is there's somebody out there for everybody in terms of legal counsel, right? So I don't think we should get. I don't think anybody should get worried or scared and be like, oh, okay, getting a lawyer was going to. No, please. Yes.
Yeah, do not have to pay like cash, right? There are sometimes that you come to an agreement with your lawyer, right? Like you get so and so percentage of if it ever comes to, do you understand? It depends on who and your lawyer. You just have to have
But it's still cash at the end of the
So the question
So let's say you cannot pay that big price. It's still cash.
lawyer must talk. Okay, so the floor is open for questions.
You have like an idea for an incorporated
Oh, I did. That's what
the elements of different IPs, like copyright, trademark, industrial design as well. How do you go about? Is there like a process? How do you?
So I'm a bit confused. You haven't registered this in the company.
Yeah, but I've registered a business name. I think. So I've registered a business name. It's like an arm of the brand. But it has a brand, it has an icon. It also has like a stated.
Okay, so anything to do with incorporation, business name, trustees, NGOs, completely separate from business. T-shirts galore. There's a trademark for T-shirt galore in the class of clothing, for example, because there's different classes for trademarks. Now you registered that business name successfully because there is no other business name with that name. But now you want to release T-shirts called T-shirts galore, and you cannot do that because there's a trademark that will stop you from infringing on their rights. So business names, people own business names, people own, like you can have a limited company, it does not mean you own the legal right to use or exploit the name. Hence why you should do trademark searches before you register a business name. And anyone else can add to that. But that's something that people neglect. Even me before I was a lawyer, I neglected that as well. I used to register companies without even checking the trademarks, which means that I'm limiting what I can do with that company name. Because in some people's classes, I'll be infringing on their rights as trademarks.
How do you deal with freelancers? Like when you give them work to do for you, like to make sure
What
that
is a contract?
and if they don't sign NDAs, for instance, like I think NDAs are supposed to be super mutual.
That's don't share anybody, share what I have. And you still have to get a contract with a freelancer work. So like you said, if he's going to write if he's going to be your sketch artist, you know what I'm saying? You need to get a contract. I mean, I need you to sketch, and so you're going to be. If you have him signed, then you have a problem of like what I was trying to get this scriptwriter to do this.
And since it's a freelancer, it's a little bit of a risk to you. So if he doesn't sign an NDA at first, they don't share the information with the person. Or better still, instead of having a situation of having multiple contracts, maybe an NDA, then another contract of engagement, you can just give me a contract of engagement, and within that contract of engagement, there's confidentiality clause saying you cannot share what any information I'm giving you. You cannot use it, even if you're not sharing. You as a person cannot use it, whether I'm using it or not. If the person doesn't sign this, it's a risky business. The person is literally the person is a free man. You don't own the person. You cannot limit what the person can do. So if the person doesn't sign it, there's no need of going into business with the person.
For a new content creator, what do you guys say should be the basic roadmap?
The best one?
Basic roadmap, like the principal thing that you create or creating has to do. What are those basic things that should do?
Do you have something already?
Okay, fine, yeah, I'm a writer.
Yeah. Okay.
If I'm actually not on the IP thing,
Do you have
it's confused and yeah, I have content on it.
So, in terms of what you said about what you need to do, you need to, because I believe that whatever the reason why we're here, not getting the lawyer, because you're going to pay the lawyer. You're going to do. So, the one thing is actually about making money from that your own IP. So, it's also very important to know that, okay, this is what I'm doing. People after getting the lawyer, how can I market myself? How can I market it? How can I get to the sellers? Who will be interested in this product of mine? How can I reach out to the right people? It is important because everything that we're talking about here is equals to naira and kobo. In fact, dollars now, right? So it's very important.
Very, very important thing.
Branches.
So, sorry, let me just answer your question. So, apart from getting there, which is very important, right? You still need to go and register with your works with the NCC, that is Nigerian Copyright Commission.
Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much.